Welcome, everybody. We've been focusing on rumination, and we're going to continue to focus on this. I think in hearing everybody at the end of last week and talking to some of you in other areas or other times, it seems like this is a really maybe kind of something that there's a lot of struggling with. There's a lot of rumination happening, and of course, because we're not taught how to do anything differently but think through things. One of the most common things is, even as we grow up, society tells us, family tells us, people tell us, maybe we're overreacting or kind of doubt our emotions around it. So we kind of learn to try to be more rational. Yeah, what does rational mean? And rationality is not all it's cracked up to be either. Because if kind of my philosophy by now, it needs to be a balance. It needs to be the middle path between the two. There's some, schools of thought that even say we have emotional mind and we have rational mind. And both have their pros and their cons, and we can't live one without the other. You think rational mind, it's like Dr. Spock, like Star Trek, like this is factual and I don't feel, right? Like it's like, okay, so there's that extreme, and there's a need for that. And there's the other balancing piece here, the other part, emotion mind, thinking about somebody that might be highly emotional. I don't know. I'm thinking about Britney Spears. Like I grew up in the 90s, so I'm like, all right, when she shaved her head and she was, kind of losing it. And now we found out why, because she was under some really intense issues with money and parents and so forth. But either way, we can find these extremes. And it's really not about good, bad, better, worse. We need both. Yeah, we need both rationality and emotion. And this is often referred to as wise mind, this ability to kind of listen to both, to really tap in to both. And what happens is usually internally we start warring, and meaning these two sides don't tend to necessarily get along. They try to win out. Yeah. So in other words, think about a time, maybe you felt really reactive to something, and there may be times where you're just reacting, and that doesn't always feel good. So we kind of go into rational mind to, well, what are these people, could they be thinking something else? And, maybe it's not as bad, and, you don't need to be so hard on these people, whatever it might be. And it almost can feel like one part's winning in the moment and one part's losing, or we almost feel like one part's being punished. And the one that tends to get punished is the part of us that feels emotion maybe more strongly. Because rational thought, is logical. Emotions are not necessarily logical. They're important, and they're telling us something, and they're information. But applying reason to emotion, that's hard. But also applying emotion to reason, also hard. Yeah. Why am I bringing this up today? Well, one, we're focusing on rumination. The other is, I know we all have different ways of dealing with, crises and, things that are happening. But, just like when we were in COVID, there was kind of, a worldwide crisis happening, and we couldn't avoid it. We needed to talk about it. And today we have political crises. We have, really awful things happening throughout the country, throughout the world. And so regardless of where you stand on that, it tends to be something we want to avoid. We don't like to talk about, might even feel unsafe talking about. Some people jump into talking about it. But what I've started to notice with myself, with others, is this rationality, emotion, rationality, and it almost feels chaotic inside, because how do you make sense of both? Yeah? How do you come to terms with both? And I think when we can't connect with that wise mind, with that part of us that we've talked about in here is like observer self, or in like parts work, or what's called internal family systems, you might call the capital S self, being able to take these both parts as information and synthesizing it, that part gets left out. Yeah. So we kind of flip flop and go, okay, I'm rational. Okay, reactive. Okay, and this movement, do you see? Almost, I'm creating a cycle with it, right? And this reminds us of rumination. Yes, I feel, I shouldn't feel. I want to feel, I can't. I need, I want, right? And all of a sudden, we're in this cycle. Yeah. Okay. This happens when we're warring inside. So today, we're going to focus on how do we start to go towards these things, so we can hear from them, rather than create that kind of tornado effect. You know? I think a few caveats, things I want to say. When we're working with both these parts, rational, emotional, again, there's not a judgment or a value being placed on either one. Yeah, I want to be clear about that. Because a lot of times we start to work with emotion, we're so used to it. This is just how it works. We're so used to the rational mind being like, well, that's the mind, right? That's the one we should want to be with. And no. Does Dr. Spock care about, whether, can he weigh an ethical dilemma? Like, they're in space. Can he go, there's a child and an older adult, and the ship's gonna crash into one of them. What do I do? Right? No, he's gonna do logic, but that's not something you can decide on, right? So first of all, you'd have to have emotion. Second of all, it's an awful situation to be in, right? I'm not saying that that's the situation we're all in. It's just logic doesn't always win there. Yeah, but if you also take emotion, that doesn't always win either. So again, it's about balance. But what happens is we tend to veer towards one and kind of almost hold one higher. And when we do that, we're actually negating the other, and it gets louder. Do you ever notice the more you try to I'm going to think about, I'm going to just try to listen to the other people and see what they're saying, the people that don't agree with me. And then your anger just gets boiling and boiling, gets louder and louder. There's a reason for that, because we're not tending to both. Yeah. So when we're thinking about this, kind of emotion, mind, a rational mind, again, we want to come back to balance. Yeah. So you might say, okay, well, I'm really activated right now. I need to vent and feel and react. Sure, that makes sense. When we do that, when we overly do that, when we're not also helping, pull in rational mind and go, what are my values? Am I doing the things I need to be doing? We can get overly consumed into something. Yeah. If you're like me and also struggle with ADHD, we can get even more consumed into something, because it's a misnomer that ADHD is inattentive. It's actually we're paying attention to way too many things and hyper-focusing. And that hyper-focus can be on a lot of these things, and that can be a really emotionally driven way. Yeah? It doesn't have to be. Sometimes it's in a thought way. We just go down cycles of thoughts and thoughts and thoughts and try to solve it. And I'm not just saying with ADHD. I'm just saying if you have ADHD, it's even harder. It's just one of my colleagues, some of you may know Kiri Ann Nielsen, who works with us. She says it's like playing the game on hard. Like everybody has the like I play Street Fighters with my kids. It's like picking hard versus like just playing it on normal. We are going, so here's a few other things to just be aware of as we're focusing on all of this. The reason I'm bringing politics in the picture is because it seems ever present for everybody. If it's not for you, then it's not for you, and we can choose something else to focus on. But for our meditation today, we're going to focus a little bit on this to figure out how do we want to regulate ourselves. And again, that means paying attention to both. It doesn't mean shutting out one or the other. And I think that's where we get lost. When it's like, I need to be less reactive, we try to shut down emotion. It's like, no, keep the emotion. Let's just also bring this part on board and hear some balanced perspective. Yeah. Again, it's not saying that if you're feeling a lot of emotion, you aren't having a balanced perspective. That is not what I'm saying, and this is where it gets confusing. It's that I've said this in here last week. I'm gonna say it again. I think I said it in the past few weeks. I feel like feeling emotions at a strong level is like a superpower. It's like you get to feel it. That's what really being alive is. And with great power comes great responsibility. And so that means listening to all parts within us, yeah, which includes emotion and rational. So again, the way this comes out is if I am so against this thing, whatever it is, I'm against, iPhones. So I don't want this. I'm against it. Yeah, I can have a great cause. It can be values driven, all of that. If I get sucked into it and I'm just campaigning around that and I'm negating because I'm so into that emotion, my self-care, I'm not meditating, I'm not exercising, I'm not, going to work maybe because I'm so into this. I can't think straight. I'm starting to lose sleep over it. That's not feeling balanced anymore. Yeah. So rationality, bringing that part in, is helping with the emotion to say, okay, I'm feeling all this intensity, and let me remember some of my skills, and let me bring in these mindfulness concepts, and maybe, I can't sit right now, so I need to do some mindful movement, some yoga, whatever that might be, but ways of really drawing in skills. And you might just say, with, again, being able to observe, I'm feeling it's really off balance, yeah? And I need to talk to somebody. I need to talk to a friend, spouse, a loved one, a professional, because sometimes we are just feeling so out of balance. Yeah. So, I think that's what, most of what I want to kind of present today, and then we're gonna practice some of this. And I want to save some time at the end to talk about what you've noticed. Also, when it comes to different things happening in the world, we all have different ways of dealing with it. It doesn't make it good or bad how we deal with it. It makes it our way. Meaning, if one person's way is to avoid it all, another person's to approach it all, that's our way. So if you're like, I don't even want to be in this meditation today, don't focus on any of the political stuff, any of that. Just let yourself go into what you normally do, and let's touch lightly on it. Yeah. The reason for saying this is we have defenses for a reason. If you lower our defenses too quickly, it's overwhelming. So we need to stay in that, safe, challenge, overwhelming, stay in that safe to challenge zone. Yeah. So avoidance is not necessarily a bad thing. I know we tend to say it can be, and it is, and whatever, but it's not. Sometimes we need it when things are just too overwhelming. So I bring this up to say, there can be a lot of judgment around how somebody's dealing with something, and I just want to say, it's really a judge-free zone. I want that to be the case in here of like, hey, you experience it how you experience it. If you want to turn everything off, that's what you do, because I believe that's what you need. If you can't, like me, I can't do that. So like I think I described last week, my son can go, I don't have poop in my pants, and like, I can't do that, right? It's just not me. I can't. I go crazy doing that. Like, I'm not feeling this, but I am. And so again, sometimes it's just part of who we are. Sometimes it's just our ways that we defend against things. One thing, though, that will increase anxiety, will increase tension, will increase all of this and make it even worse is the rumination, because we're trying to use a mental process to deal with an emotional and mental process, meaning it's a whole body, a whole system approach. And I'll be even more specific for those feeling a sense of powerlessness, helpless, hopeless. Powerlessness is like, think about when you feel empowered to do something. Powerlessness is like the opposite, feeling not just a disempowerment, but like nothing I can do. Like I I can't even, like the classic powerlessness is like those dreams some people have had as kids where it's like you're trying to hit somebody and it's like slow-mo and they're in fast mode and you're like, I don't know what's happening, or like you can't ever hit the person or hit the ball. That's the like feeling of powerlessness. Yeah. The only way to really deal with that is community, is to be able to talk to people, to vent, to cry, to be, to love, to connect. Yeah. And so when we're ruminating and we're constantly thinking and going over, oftentimes it's to really deal with the emotional, what's happening inside, the powerlessness. And so why I'm bringing this up is you might start to just check yourself when you're feeling like, hey, I'm thinking about this constantly. See what is, when you ask that quintessential question, what is it that I need right now? If it is a feeling of powerlessness, oftentimes it is talking to others. It just is. And talking to somebody that you feel like can understand you, not somebody you feel like you have to defend yourself against. Yeah. So I'm not saying go up to somebody that shares different views as you and just be like, okay, I'm already feeling bad, I'm gonna do this. No, I'm saying talk to somebody that you trust, and that you can just let yourself just vent and be, because just being like heard and somebody saying, I get it, I feel the same way. Like that's the power. That's power. Yeah. Like a lot of times some of us may even shy away from those conversations because we don't know what to do. You ever do that? Like, I don't know what I would say if somebody told me how powerless they were feeling, so I just won't have that conversation. No, it'll feel awkward. Yeah, some head nods. Okay, so what you say, especially if you're feeling the same way, is just that. I'm feeling the same way. Or just validate. Yeah, that sounds awful, but doesn't mean you have to fix it. Doesn't mean you have to convince them. People just need to be heard. You probably just need to be heard. I just need to be heard. These are needs. Okay? So, we're going to practice around this today. What I'd like to offer is, if you've been, we're not going to bring anything that's not here. Yeah? So if it's something that's not in your mind, I don't want you to bring it in. Meaning, if you're like, I wasn't even thinking of anything political or anything in the world happening, that's okay. You might let yourself, like if you've been like, no, I'm avoiding it, I can open up to it a little bit, fine. But for those of us that's like, this is ever present, this is kind of like every, when I'm not here, I'm working, talking to people, or, looking at all this stuff that's happening. Then we're just going to open up to what's already here, yeah? And remember, safe, challenge, overwhelm. If you're already in overwhelm, let's focus on anchor today, because that's really the key. The only reason to work with this is because of all the overwhelm that I'm hearing about, I'm talking to people about, and kind of this imbalance inside. And so we're going to just work a little bit today with grounding, with really feeling an anchor. And then maybe just starting to open up to kind of this idea of like rational emotion, mind, and just kind of hearing from both sides a little bit. We'll kind of talk to these parts. So, and if that feels way too weird for you, just try it. And if you don't like it, you can let it go. But we're gonna attempt it today. Okay, so we're gonna shift into our meditation. So go ahead and find a comfortable posture. And I'll just share that, if I'm finding myself really caught up in ruminating about something, or something really feeling stuck in my mind, or just really kind of almost feeling obsessive about something, it can be really nice to go down to the floor, to the ground, even if you're on a second story or multi-story. Just something about being down on the floor. So I invite you to maybe try this if you're feeling like you're, really ungrounded or untethered, really caught up in thoughts. And another kind of piece would be to even invite yourself to lay down on the floor, to maybe place one hand over the heart, the other over the belly, and just start off by feeling the breath from the outside and the ground supporting you. You're always welcome to sit as well. I'll stay seated just for leading purposes, but feel free to find whatever posture might fit. And let's start by taking a few deep breaths in and out. Using this as a way to really feel the anchor in this moment. Allowing the breath to be natural. And if for any reason the breath doesn't feel available today, feel free to shift the anchor and just whenever I mention breath, and kind of replace it with whatever anchor you've chosen. And spending some time right now connecting with breathing. If the mind is going into the future or the past, even if it's just seconds in the past or future, maybe remind yourself this isn't, whatever it's concerned about isn't happening right this second in this space. If it is, you can make a choice whether you need to attend or tend to whatever the mind might be focused on, or to let it go. Giving yourself the freedom of choice. And actually, we do have freedom to choose, but we also, when we make a choice, it can feel freeing as well. So kind of noticing once you choose into the practice, does it open up a bigger space to be here? Whenever the mind wanders, remembering, this is what minds do. It's perfectly okay, it's natural, normal. And just as minds wander, we have an ability to notice this, to acknowledge it, and then to guide the attention back to the sensations of breathing. And as you notice this ability to be the one noticing, just make a note of that. This is the observer self. This part of you that can notice thoughts and not be the thoughts. Notice emotions and yet not be the emotions. It's a part of you that can choose to come back continuously over and over to the sensations of breathing. Remember that throughout the practice, you can return to this anchor whenever you need to. If you start to feel like you're heading close to overwhelm, please come back to the anchor and stay there until you start feeling a sense of safety again. Maybe just somewhat challenged. Now, see if you can kind of open up to an emotion that maybe you've been feeling lately. Maybe trying to use a rational approach, not maybe feel it or try to think through it. This could be anger, sadness, powerlessness, helplessness, hopelessness, disgust. An emotion that maybe you don't like others to see. Try to hide. Noticing where you feel this emotion most strongly in the body. If it's not in the body, then how you're aware of it. Maybe there's a sense of it in the head or somewhere else. Even though the head is part of the body, oftentimes it's hard to think in those terms. Again, noticing where you feel it. And then I want you to just check in with how you're feeling towards this emotion, this strong emotion. And if it's anything other than like curiosity, openness, kind of an open-heartedness, that's okay. This means there's kind of another part in the mix. And so we're going to ask this part to see if it will step aside to allow you to show up, work directly with this strong emotion. And I want you to imagine sitting at a table. This can be a conference table, or I know some of you have mentioned having a different arrangement here. Maybe you're imagining a campfire, a powwow, whatever it might be that helps you kind of connect with this. I want you to invite in a strong emotion. And then if there was another part present that you asked to step to the side, and just check in if it did, if it stepped to the side. Maybe a part that doesn't like the emotion, wants it to go away. If it didn't, or the way to check in with this is to ask yourself, how am I feeling now towards this strong emotion? Again, if it's anything other than curiosity, kindness, openness, compassion, then likely there's a part there. If it's that same part, then maybe invite it to the table as well. And also invite in the part of you that's more maybe rational, that tries to rationalize, tries to makes sense of the emotion, maybe tries to talk the emotion down. And invite this too to the table. And a way to see if you are an observer self is to ask yourself how you're feeling towards each of these parts you've invited to the table. So checking in with the strong emotion, the rational part, the third part that if it needed kind of airtime, if it kind of stayed there. How do you feel towards that? And again, if it's anything other than kind of open, curious, compassionate, open-hearted, there's more parts there to ask to either step to the side, and you can ask if those step to the side, and if you notice that there's strong feeling towards these other parts, then just keep repeating the same thing, inviting the other part to come to the table. Doing this until you feel like, when you can ask yourself how you're feeling towards these parts, that there's an openness, a curiosity, inquisitiveness, a wanting to know more about these parts. As you do this, we might end up with more parts at the table than we can work with today, and that's okay. And just let these parts know that in time we may get to them. Today we're really focusing on the strong emotion and the part of us that wants to rationalize this maybe away or stop us from reacting. So if you've come to a place in which you feel relatively open to these parts, then proceeding. If you feel kind of stuck, or there's just a part that won't kind of let go, then maybe just acknowledging that, being curious with it, listening to it, applying the same questions that I'm going to have others ask to these parts to this part. So turning towards the part that feels maybe more emotion right now, or the part that you originally started working with that maybe is feeling a high amount of emotion, and see if you can just listen to it and ask it, what do you want to tell me right now? What do you want me to hear? You're going to ask this into your body. Try not to think too much, and just ask and receive. Maybe even letting this part know that you do hear it. Maybe ask if it didn't send this strong emotion your way. What does it fear would happen in your system, to you? For example, if there's maybe a strong sense of anger or rage, maybe by asking this question, anger or rage, it might tell you wouldn't be getting your needs met, or people would stomp all over you, or you wouldn't care. So taking the inverse of that, this part really wants you to care, wants you to have boundaries. It's trying to help you in some way. So maybe just acknowledging that. In other words, listening for why this part is so loud. What does it want you to know? And now let that part know that this is the beginning of the conversation. We're going to turn towards the rational part, the part that wants to maybe be more logical, take perspective. And here too, turn towards this part and asking, what does it want you to know? What does it have to share with you? In other words, why is it being so loud? As you listen to this part, maybe asking it a similar question. If it weren't so rational, if it didn't do what it's doing, what's its fear would happen? For example, maybe the rational part would fear you'd be alone, or people wouldn't like you, or you'd feel disconnected, or something entirely different here. Maybe it's fearful you'd lose control. Fearful of losing your life. And sometimes as you turn towards both these parts, and this may not be the case for you, but sometimes both these parts are wanting something very similar for you. If this is the case, then maybe acknowledging that to these parts. If they're wanting different things, then maybe acknowledging that, making note of maybe this is a place that of focus of how do you meet both of these parts and what they need. Before we end this practice, maybe asking these parts if there's anything you can do to help. A way to help both of these parts get what they need or help them in their goals. Maybe the way of helping is to listen to each, give them both airtime, just as you're doing now. And if you feel like you've connected in some way to these parts, to this meditation, maybe just developing a brief plan of how you can continue this, to connect with these parts this week. This might look like just acknowledging when they come up, saying, I hear you, I see you, I get this is what you're wanting. If you're left in a different state, maybe one of confusion or this didn't really land, then see if you can let that be okay for today. Maybe it just wasn't the day to do it, or the way that it was led wasn't the way your system needed to hear it. Again, this is perfectly fine too. Now, when you're ready, before we end this practice, thanking these parts for showing up, And the parts that we didn't get to, acknowledging them as well. And then ending the practice, once that feels complete, by honoring it in any way that you might like to do.